How's everybody doing today? Glad to be here to do another Obsidian Office Hours because actually today I realized we're gonna catch up on what I wanted to talk about last week regarding the Freerite Traveler. But more importantly, actually, I've started learning Japanese, so I thought it'd be fun to talk about like managing skills, like and how I'm like kind of approaching that right now, because learning a whole new language with, especially with like different characters and that kind of stuff, some of the problems I've run into and that kind of stuff, should be kind of fun to basically go over. So with that, I think let's go ahead and get started because yeah, it is already 3. So first thing first, the Freerite Traveler, what is it? Well, I guess let me start. Actually, you know what's easy? Let me see. Let me do this. Let me go to the intermission so I can get a full screen. All right, much better. Okay, perfect. So here, I have my Freerite Traveler. Oh, I realized I just covered the mic. The probably won't. Okay, so I have my Freerite Traveler right here, and what it is basically a glorified mini text editor that has very simple functionality, but it has a scissor switch keyboard here. So you can see here that if I go ahead and type, this is the sound. So it's kind of got that mechanical keyboard feel, right? But it's not as clicky clackety. And more importantly, I think this is particularly useful feature because when you're using the Freerite Traveler, it's really in a time where you're probably in like a coffee shop, or more importantly, like if you're someone who flies a lot, you might be using this on the airplane. So having loud keys is just kind of disrespectful to everyone else around you, right? When you're busy typing. But the beautiful thing about this is that it basically is very minimalist from like a distraction perspective. So it does have Wi-Fi in the sense that like it will back up your documents to a service, and then that way you at least have like some sort of syncing in that regard. And so there's no like memory card to say that like I would like stick in here to remove and that kind of stuff. And the other thing is that it's basically pure text. So there's no like images and that kind of stuff that you'd be embedding. The whole idea is really to get you in that writing mode and nothing else. So minus the distractions and that kind of stuff. And so one of the reasons why this even came up to me, to be honest, was because as someone who, kind of is always plugged in almost like to a fault, it makes it kind of tricky when I need to kind of zone in on writing. So, sure, I can turn off my Wi-Fi and that kind of stuff. But even sometimes when I'm even in Obsidian, when I'm in the midst of writing, I find that depending on my mood, I'll start like veering into like refactoring territory. So I'll be like writing my note and I'll be like, oh, what would be really good though is like if I went ahead and refactor this and then I tagged it like this. But then what this means is I can also do like a data view layer with this thing. And like all of a sudden, like I'm so far from the original topic of like what I was typing that like I've broken the flow state. With this though, I actually don't have to worry about that because it's just me, my thoughts, and maybe like the book that I'm reading and just basically jotting down ideas. And that to me has been incredibly valuable. So let's talk about like how this really does fit in though with the Obsidian basically vault structure, because as I mentioned, it syncs to a service, but right now it doesn't. Well, we're gonna look together on how that works. So let me go back to my live stream. Sorry, with the live screen, and let's take a look. So I'm gonna go ahead and open this up, drag this over here, and all right. So what we're gonna do here is let's do the, I believe, hold on one sec. Is that over here? Perfect. Let me move this over here. Then that way I can unlock it without worrying about this being shared. And then, okay. So the Freerite is being managed with a third-party service called Postbox. And so we can see here that when I go ahead and sign into Postbox, here we actually see all of the stuff that I've basically taken notes on. And so what's neat about this is you get some of like your little metrics as far as like how many days you've been writing, your days streaked, and that kind of stuff. And so here actually we have in my folder, so that's the other thing actually I didn't mention. Inside of here, you have 3 different folders that are basically like hard-coded buttons for A, B, C. And so it allows you to do a little bit of organization. So call it like, for me right now, anything I want to do quick capture on, I go to folder C, C for capture. And then otherwise, I haven't really decided the A and B part yet, but maybe like At this point, I think I'm using A for all my official note taking. So if I'm like taking notes on a book, like you see here, I read the book Quitter by John A. Cuff. I think it's funny that the title is off. Because I don't think it's AQ. And so been taking notes on that. And then I think B is more for like, at this point, like maybe more like personal thoughts and ideas that maybe are less formed. So I think A for formal note taking, B for like Ben's thoughts. So, I mean, I'm sure you'll come up with your own basically architecture in the event you choose to get one, but it's been really great for that. So, of course, now that we have this and we're here to talk about Obsidian, how does this fit in with everything? Well, the first thing is that everything in here, as you look, basically looks like standard Markdown as far as that goes. And so the question is, it needs to sync to Dropbox. And so that's what I think is interesting. So I believe I have it currently synced to Dropbox, but oh well, apparently not. So let's go ahead and make sure this is working, because this is the part of the workflow that I haven't gotten to. Let's see. Apps post box A doesn't exist. Interesting. Okay. But then how do I create it? So this is what we're gonna figure out today together. Cloud syncing. Your Freewrite is flexible. Yep. Sync to Dropbox. It will if I can just define it that way. Okay. So now that I've synced it, how advanced? Oh, you can sync to a specific folder. Oh, this is good. I like this. Okay, hang on. So upload documents to Dropbox. File type. Oh, interesting. They're only doing the doc. Oh, here we go. Why does it say docx markdown syntax? That's kind of surprising to me. I mean, let's just see what happens. So here, drop down, and then, yeah, I've selected Dropbox. That's Dropbox. That's Dropbox. Okay. So the connections here are already connected. So if I go ahead and check out my postbox, this is what I really need to try to figure out. Syncing to Dropbox folder A. And so I think the problem is that it's clearly trying to create an apps folder here, but I want to define more. So this is looks like a workflow issue from what I can tell regarding this. So what if I change it to a different service, right? For now, I just want to see what happens. Let's see. I'll just go ahead and sync it to my Google Drive, and let's see what comes out of it. Okay, syncing to Google Drive. Whoop, that's not what I wanted. It switched on me. No external document found for this piece. So we have Drive, and then, oh, here we go. So there you go. It just synced to Google Drive. And what do we have in here? We have everything in here. Okay. So interesting. They come in with some formatting, bookmark a link. That's kind of interesting. Okay. If I were to copy this and put this in Obsidian, for example, so if I go to my Quitter by John Acuff, and then I drop this in my notes, looks like everything did format correctly as far as Markdown. So this is good. I'm happy to see this. The only slight problem I have with this, though, is that, well, I would like this to be more automatic. I shouldn't have to automatically copy it over. Oh, I see 503. Jacob, how's it going? Thanks for coming to hang out. It's kind of interesting that they're kind of insisting on the apps when I have sort of more of a team structure in my Dropbox right now. So that's rather unfortunate. But maybe what I want to do then is I will create a folder here called apps, and then I'll just do it specifically to myself for now. And then let's go ahead and share that. So test that. Okay, apps is here now. So now that apps is here, does this mean that you will sync it to Dropbox? Apps postbox A. Huh. Very interesting. Okay, so the syncing here, it looks like, is a little bit, the APIs here are a little less than I'd like. But okay, so actually this is a question worth thinking about. Is that typically when we're thinking about automation and infrastructure, especially with our writing, it is common to want this thing to be called automatic. So whatever I'm writing in my Freewrite Traveler automatically goes to Obsidian. However, one could probably argue, though, I would say, in that the mode you're writing in when you're in the Freewrite Traveler is a bit different than your Obsidian. In that, like, I'm not doing any linking. I'm probably not, any tagging I would do would be more organic and less according to the types that I defined in Obsidian. And so, honestly, for the amount that I write within Freewrite Travel, honestly, if I'm thinking about it, it might not be the worst thing to call it, make this part a little bit more manual, only because I'm not writing so much that the Freewrite Traveler is necessarily my primary writing device, but it's more of a vehicle to get like a specific mode out. And so in that regard, it's kind of a push and pull. I mean, don't get me wrong. I would ideally like, well, you know what though? I just realized if we're syncing to Google Drive, hang on. I'm wondering if this means, oh, interesting. So it's doing like that. So hang on. So we do cloud syncing, sync all folders to Dropbox. If I synced it to Google Drive, there is probably a little bit of an automation that we could do. So here we synced it all to Google Drive, advance, Google Drive, connections. Okay. This would mean then theoretically that, is this just going to be uploaded directly, though? I want it to be in a specific folder. This is what I'm a little concerned with right now. Postbox. Postbox ABC. Oh, good. This is A. This is B. Okay. If this is the case, then I have an idea. So if we go into Zapier, let's see if we can get this to work. We're going to create a Zap. And what we want to do is we want to detect things in Google Drive. And what we want to do is we want to know when something has been changed. So updated file, but not its folder. New file in any folder, yes. But how about new file or update? Can I do all of these? To a specific folder, but not its subfolders. Directly to but not its subfolders. No, okay, I'm going to say new file. This will be what starts the Zap. Okay, sign into Google Drive. I already have that here. bencodezen.io, great. And what we're going to do here now is, oh, wait. Any Google Drive. Oh, wait, this is a little bit dangerous, I think. Hang on. Set trigger. Okay, my Google Drive. Can we do like a folder? Okay, let's see, load more. Okay, my Google Drive, fine. I'm fine with this. On my Google Drive, we will test the trigger. We'll find a recent file, confirm, and that it's tested. I want to change the event. It is Google Drive. Oh, maybe. Google Doc? Let's see. Choose event, new document. Inside any folder. It's kind of interesting when you think about these APIs, right? Because what I'm doing here is actually not anything terribly like complicated. I would like to point the Zap at a specific folder, but it's kind of saying even within a specific folder, you know what? I guess this could work here. This is why I'm saying that. So we want to do it in a specific folder, and then we'll do it to Google Docs. And so honestly, what we could say is that now that we're in here, we can say that when we're in a folder and we're in Postbox, but I want to do a specific folder in Postbox, let's just focus on folder A. Okay, we are going to test the trigger. We couldn't find a document. Okay, let's test this out. Is it in folder A? There is a document in folder A. Create a new document to test your trigger again. Okay. So let's do this real quick. New blank document. Let's see. Test Zapier doc. That's that. And now that we have that, let's test the trigger again. Okay, it found document A. It found all this stuff. Then what I want to do is move it to Dropbox. Choose Dropbox. Great. Action, upload file. And then I'll sign into Dropbox. Allow. Kind of silly though, I will say, the fact that I have to go from the Postbox. But again, I think this is a limitation because they're assuming you have an individual account. And so if you have an individual account with your app sync, you probably won't really notice it. But part of the problem though is that with Obsidian being specified on the folder, this does mean that like if you really want the automation to flow, something like Zapier is probably necessary. So here, what I would do is I would go into my digital forest folder. Oh, interesting. They already went top folder. Oh, this is the top folder. Okay. Give me my digital forest. Give me my file with the title .md. I think this will work. Specify file extension. Yes, please that. Specify file name will be the title. And then the new document. Insert data, new document in folder. Okay. Must be a file object from another service. I guess this is... Oh, file exists, but shown. Raw HTML content. Wow, this is intense. I just want the object. File EPUB, file ODT, file.txt, file.zip. Okay, file.txt. I think that's what I want. And then it'll be, the file name will be test Zapier doc, file name extension .md, include the initial dot. Okay, .md. Continue. Okay, so send file to Dropbox. Test and review. So I realize this one would need to be tweaked a little bit. Hey, how's it going, Dragon Dust? Okay, so the file was just sent to Dropbox. So inside of my Obsidian Vault now, what we should see here, if I hide at the root level at least, here we go. Test Zapier doc was sent. Okay, this is good. So now that we have this, I'm going to go back and change something though. We don't want it to merely be in Digital Forest. I actually, in this particular case, think... Yeah, in this case, I think it just needs to go in an inbox. Because I would argue that when you're in the midst of writing something with your Freewrite Traveler, you're just in a writing mode. You haven't taken the time to necessarily process it. Because one of the things about this that you might notice is that there's no like arrow keys and the editing is a little bit more limited. So you're really more about free flowing your ideas and like things like spell check and all that stuff you'll take care of later. And so as a quick capture device, it's very good. But I would say from like a reviewing perspective, you're probably better off doing that on an actual machine like your laptop. So in that regard, I'm actually going to put it in the inbox so that it's like kind of separated away from everything. And then that should be good. So we can test and continue. So now we should see two different things, which is great. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so now if we come in here, inbox, test Zapier doc. Great. Okay, so now I can turn on the Zap. And then Zap is on share a copy. And so actually, you know what? I'll make a note to share this copy of this inside of our session. So here's the resource for the Zap we just made, where we created a... But again, some people are using like Google Drive and stuff already for their Vault. So this would actually be almost moot. Still, actually, I realize you still have that problem where you want to point it at a specific folder, but that's beside the point because I really wish you could configure where Postbox was saving it to, but all in due time. Okay, so according to this, it'll run every 15 minutes, but I'm pretty sure we can manually trigger it to make sure it works. So it's on. Great. Upload files to Dropbox, Zap history, errors, guide, outline. Okay, so to test that this works, I'm going to come inside of here of my Freewrite Traveler. I'm going to turn it on. And so basically, the other thing that you might not have noticed is that it's an e-ink display. So that battery life on this is excellent, as you would expect from an e-ink device. So I'll go to my folder A right here. And then, I just realized, though, as I'm looking at the camera, I am going to switch real quick. Boom. Okay. That was silly. Okay, yeah. So as I was saying, e-ink display here with the scissor keyboard. And so I've just turned it on. I'm going to go to my folder A, which I hit right here. And then I'm going to hit new twice, which would give me a brand new document. Maybe press both of these at once. There are some, there we go. Okay, new key. Okay, so here we go. My new document. It's really awkward to type at this angle. Aha. All right. So now that this is done, this should go ahead and sync with Postbox. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and switch on back over to the live stream. And so if things went well here, and we go over to my Postbox, there we go. My new document just went here, which means now I should see my new document here, which is great. And then the Zapier probably is not triggered yet, only because, let's see, Postbox document to Dropbox folder. Okay, so then here now I should be able to, how do I get my, I don't need to edit it anymore. I just need to trigger it. So here's my Zaps, upload content. And then I'll run the Zap, looking for new items, going. Should have got that new doc. And it's saying we couldn't find any new items. This is a little unsettling because, yep, that should be there. This should be here. Test Zapier doc, that's good. There is a new document right here. That is not getting synced. Looking for new items. Cannot find any new items. Why? Looking for new items already. Okay. So, all right. While I'm debugging this, let's take a look. Yes. So I have a question here from Dragon Dust. I'm sitting out for about 2 weeks and I love it. Still have to figure out how I would like to structure my notes. That's so exciting, Dragon Dust. I think it's one of those things where as you use Obsidian more, you start to figure out the problems you used to have with your notes, and you get to have the opportunity to start fixing those things. So very exciting. So 503 with the device. Yep, it's the Freewrite Traveler. And, one would probably argue that if you have already like a portable laptop, so for example, I have a MacBook Air 13-inch, it's already small enough that you arguably wouldn't necessarily need a device like the Freewrite Traveler. But when you're really on the go and you're not trying to bring an entire laptop with you, I do find the Freewrite Traveler is really perfect for putting it in like a smaller bag, like a sling bag with like your bottle of water and your book and just kind of going out for a bit. And especially with the e-ink display, it works particularly well, I think, when you're outside. So a bit of a nuanced use case, I think, depending on how, but like, honestly, isn't that to some extent, I think that's all tech, right? Because some people really don't really care for like e-ink readers, for example. For books, they'd rather have like the paperback. So, I mean, I think the key, I think, for me in sort of telling you my experience with it is that you just have another data point so that in the event you're like, I have a similar problem and I'd like to solve it, the Freewrite Traveler might be a great device for you from like an on-the-go perspective. Okay, so I'm a little sad this didn't work, but I'm also not totally surprised. We found a document. Which document did you find? Tell me, what document did you find? Names, owner, title. Man, look at all this metadata content. Where's the title? Test Zapier doc. That's not what I wanted. It's a little bit weird, actually. It's almost like it didn't detect that as a new document. So maybe the trigger is just wrong. Choose app and event. New document in folder. I mean, okay. I mean, I'm willing go back to do Google Drive and say, when a file is updated in a specific folder but not its subfolders, okay, maybe this will be a better one. So I'll choose once again this account. The drive I'm choosing is my Google Drive. The folder I'm looking for is Postbox. And I want to go to folder A. Include deleted, no. Continue. Test trigger. So they found the data. They found quitter. Okay. So updated file Dropbox. Okay, fine. So this means to me then that if I go into my Freewrite Traveler, and let's see, let me go over to my folder, and let's see, page up. I gotta go. Actually, no, if I just update this existing document, just an update, right? That should actually be enough to trigger it. So to show that this worked, I'll go back to Postbox and refresh, and you'll see just an update was put right here, syncing now to to Google Drive. So this should mean that inside of our folder A Google Drive, we see just update here. Now, inside of our Zapier, if I go back and we decide to just run this now, here we go, upload. Oh, it wasn't on. Okay. Your link was updated, sure. What is it doing? Yeah, that's fine. Just go back. All right, it's on. And then if I run the Zap, it's looking for updated files. It didn't find anything that's updated. Oh, this is not great. Okay, so that means that we have a hook problem. And honestly, I think part of this, as much as I'd like to show things that always work seamlessly, this is an example clearly where there does seem to be some sort of disconnect regarding, I guess, how the events are being triggered for updating things. And so once again, for me in particular, I use the Freewrite Traveler in like spurts. So just like I finished taking notes on the, so in this particular case with Quitter by John Acuff, I would say, yeah, that's, oh, is it cutting it off? I wonder if that's why it's doing it. I can take this now. These are my notes from John Acuff, having finished the book now. And so if I go back to Quitter by John Acuff this time, I can go in here and yeah, I'm going to take all this. Oh, interesting that it won't. Can I just, interesting that I couldn't select that. Okay. I guess I'll just manually grab this and then boom, that's it. That I have some of the notes regarding this. And so, yeah, let's talk through a bit of that workflow. So now I've copied it from here and I can basically talk about what's going on. So this is not relevant anymore. All right. So for those wondering, so the book on Quitter by John Acuff talks about like this challenges the idea that when you have like a dream of like starting your own company and that kind of thing, that the natural thing to do is to quit your day job and just go. And this book is kind of designed around challenging that preconception of like how you can actually, that rather than seeing your job as like an obstacle to the things that you want to do, that in fact it's the very thing that can provide you the opportunities you need to actually make your dream come true. And so this actually quite right here is actually a quote from him, where he was doing, his dream was like to become a writer, like full time basically, and do that kind of stuff. But he was working basically primarily as like a copy editor at Auto Trader. And so here you can see that he's saying that like if he had actually quit his day job too soon, he would have killed his dream job, which he eventually got. And the basic argument here is because when you have like the 9 to 5, and like again his argument here is like you're allowed to make mistakes that don't cost very much, that then allow you to then try things with basically like without that kind of risk. Because certainly when you're stressed out, and let's face it, we have like money is a part of our, our livelihood, and it makes a difference in like what we do on the day to day, and can limit our options. And so when you're short on cash flow, it can make it tricky for you to then say no to a job that like maybe is actually not in favor of what you want to do. And as a result, if you take on too much early on because you need to pay the bills, you may have to say no to an opportunity you actually really want later on. Granted, like a lot of things, you got to take things with a grain of salt. But anyhow, so this is kind of interesting where he was just talking about like different ideas. And so I made some notes regarding like interesting things about people, like his comments regarding people's day job. And this is a really interesting quote that I found when I was reading this book, was about how, I'll just read it. Superman needed Clark Kent. Being Clark was the reason he was able to be Superman. It was how he stayed real, how he connected to real people. He couldn't be Superman the whole time. He knew problems of the day because he was around people. So go be real, go be connected with the people you work with instead of being nonstop Superman. And I think that is a really interesting idea because it is, a lot of things I think in today's world is really romanticized in that regard, to be like we just like discard everything to the side, and with that alone you'll be able to make anything happen. And I think this is a kind of it was his wife, I think, that gave him this advice, and I thought this was quite poignant in that regard. And seeing that sort of, I don't know how to explain it, like I guess a hybrid approach to things rather than having things to be like all or nothing. And lately, I talked about being on different podcasts and stuff. And I think within technology, there often is this discussion of like, what is the ultimate thing? What is like the one true way, or who will be like the winner take all? And I wonder sometimes if like this is a product of, I don't know, like it reminds me a bit of that vein of the concept of toxic positivity. And so for those who don't know about toxic positivity, I do have a link in here somewhere, but I haven't written on it. It's basically this idea that like you are so optimistic that it ends up being actually a negative thing, because you're just basically ignoring like people's, like you're not acknowledging the negative. You're just like, oh, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Everything will be okay. And you just kind of keep blindly ignoring things. So I think toxic positivity is the thing. But I would say that when it comes to this kind of stuff too, as far as like chasing dreams, chasing passions, and more importantly, like doing what you think, like is your purpose, it is easy to get to see like the really extreme versions of stories where people like quit their day job with no savings, and then suddenly they were, they got millions of dollars from VCs, and now they're just living the dream. It's very romantic, but that's also like, if you think about it, that's no different than telling you a story about someone who, but one day just walked into the grocery store, bought a lottery ticket, and all of a sudden, super wealthy or whatnot. Like, if we're talking about sustainable growth and change, which is really what we want, I think, as we talk about personal growth and development, especially since we are in this sort of idea space, then sustainability is key to this. But this also means acknowledging the trade-offs as you go between the various extremes and learning how to have those coexist, rather than feeling like, well, this entire time I need to be like a superhero and just, and this is how we end up with burnout, right? And stuff like that. So anyhow, bye Cassidy. Thanks for joining. But yeah, so, okay. In the meantime, so unfortunately it looks like the workflow on this end regarding the Freewrite Traveler to Obsidian is a little bit janky right now, since you can't just put it in. I feel like there were some people, so if you're wondering, part of the reason I was even inspired to start looking into devices, because there are some people who are doing this kind of workflow, but part of it, now that I realize it, is that I think some people are doing their vaults in Dropbox in a way that like kind of includes the auto updates. So I could see how that could work, but for now, I'm fine with a copy and paste. This is, again, I don't use it. It's not going to be, the friction is not so great that it'll be a problem. So with that, I think I'm going to leave this particular topic here at rest. And what I want to do instead, actually, though, let's switch topics. Let's talk about, like, really, I think this is exciting. We're talking about growing knowledge within Obsidian, and specifically around skill building. And so if you weren't here at the beginning, so basically I've started learning Japanese. And then when I started learning Japanese, I mean, like, I think my first tutor session was 2 days ago. And, the inspiration really behind learning Japanese, a lot of different things. But for those who don't know, I grew up watching a lot of different anime and did the authentic experience of reading subtitles with listening. But this also meant that like when it came to manga, I couldn't actually like read anything. I had to wait for everyone to translate everything. And so I've always had a really like huge curiosity with the Japanese culture and being like at least proficient with the language. And so a bunch of other reasons for why I think it would be great to be proficient in Japanese. And so one of the things I'm starting to keep track of, I've talked about this a little bit within Obsidian, is sort of tracking your higher level goals, because I think that when it comes to generating that's not the one I wanted. Oh, did it? Oh, I think I know what happened. All right, so hold on. Become proficient in Japanese. Ooh, that's not what I wanted. Become proficient in Japanese. Okay, great. So I think my hotkeys got overridden by my tablet again, because that just happened. So I'm gonna make the local graph Command G, and then my graph view Command Shift G. So here, I find that goals are actually great for this sort of graph view, because a lot of times the dependencies are a lot more complex than sort of a linear list that you can kind of keep track of. And so if we increase the depth a little bit, now this is kind of cool, because you can start to see where the intent on being on like sort of like the goal of becoming proficient in Japanese, how this pervades out into the idea space. And so I'm going to be slowly developing, I think, ways of tracking this over time. But that said, we see I got a couple comments here in the chat. So Dragon Dust mentions you store your Vault on iCloud Drive. Yeah, I've noticed a lot of iOS users actually do that, and it's really convenient to do it that way, because this means that then when you're using Obsidian on the mobile app, then you just point it to the iCloud Drive. I started out in Dropbox, so ever since I've been kind of like finagling the two. And I'm lucky enough that I'm actually experimenting with the Obsidian Sync, so that's how I'm getting around the workaround, because I believe right now in the iOS Obsidian, you're not able to actually sync directly to Dropbox. So the hoops I jumped through to try different workflows and things that people might want. Jacob here with the question, did you have separate settings for your iPads? So I believe I do, but at one point I think I accidentally turned on syncing hotkeys on all devices. At first I thought that would make sense, right? Because why not? And unfortunately, I think it doesn't totally make sense for like mobile devices. Like you're probably gonna have different keys that you want to customize on things. So that has been a little bit of a learning curve, and I've made definitely a fair amount of mistakes as far as like, as you can see, some of my original hotkeys have been overridden. So I've been sort of learning how to work with this sort of beta exploratory phase, right? I guess one of the downsides of being on the cutting edge, so to say. And then, so let's see. So the question from Jacob here. So the sync does more than just the files. Yes. So Obsidian Sync can actually do all your like preferences and all that stuff as well. So one of the cool things about Obsidian Sync here is that if I go into my sync right here, I'm actually able to look at, so I can like sync images, sync audio, basically sync everything if I wanted to, which I do. And what's neat is that you can look at your setting version history and see all the different files, what it's been. These might be only deleted. No, these aren't deleted. So so here I can see that like, when was the last time app.json was changed? And it's nice because then I can go through and look at the different versions between them and try to restore one, in case I know which one was overridden. So that's like a nice feature of Obsidian Sync that I found that you wouldn't necessarily get with like syncing to like an iCloud. In case you needed to actually do some version history, then it's a little bit trickier. So this is definitely, I think, a plus in the Obsidian Sync column. Okay, so you know what? This mic is too high for me. I got to lower it a little bit. I was doing it a little bit higher for podcast recording, but I think we can move this a bit. There you go, much better. Okay, so here from Vibing Cat, I've been using Obsidian for a couple weeks now, and I've just been writing Markdown and nothing else. Any suggestions on what to explore next in Obsidian? Oh, this is a great question. So Vibing Cat, I think you did exactly what I would want people to do is really just get familiar with using Obsidian as a Markdown editor. So I'm going to assume that when you say that you're just writing Markdown, that at this point you have already started using the wiki links to start creating links between documents. I think that's really the key part, is making that part of your organic writing process. But now that you have that, though, I would say that again, without knowing exactly kind of what content you're writing and how you're structuring things or what problem you're trying to solve with Obsidian, I do think a generic plugin that would be good for you to learn about next is something called Obsidian Data View. And so it is a community plugin that basically right here. So you see Data View. So if you go to browse here and you search for Data View, this is the next one that I kind of recommend checking out, because it gives you the ability to start querying your notes in a way that almost like treating your note a little bit more like a database, so that you can see here that I can see all the things that are from my folder called games, or that are tagged a certain way. And it's nice because you end up getting this ability to view things. So for example, let's take a look at my Obsidian Office Hours, right? So in this series, you'll see that Obsidian Office Hours has two particular headings. It has all the episodes that have been tagged Obsidian headings, as well as all the ideas that I've had for the Obsidian Office Hours. And so here it just looks like kind of regular blocks with queries. But when I switch to preview mode, you notice that I get all of a sudden it becomes very rich, in that I see a lot of the different pieces regarding things I could look into during the office hours, which is very nice. So I can actually have my ideas start to populate a bit more. And more importantly, I can see all of the different office hour sessions that I've had. This is in a bit of a table format. And so being able to customize data in this way and display it in a way that makes sense to you, and so aggregate it together, is really nice. Because while the graph on the right is very good for almost like exploratory pattern identification and drilling down where things live and how they grow, there is still a lot of value to having just a list or a table, and having things being presented in that way as well. And Obsidian Data View does a very good job in presenting that to you. So I would just, if that is something that's cool to you, I would go there. And then the only other alternative I'll give you, because I don't like to give people too many choices with this, is that if you find yourself repeating things a lot and you're like, gosh, I really wish there was a faster way to do text snippets, or to do a whole page of templating. So for example, right, if let's say let's say you and I decide to do a one-on-one pairing session, right? One of the things I recently started doing here, so let me go to my actually office hours session 11 just to show this works. So let's say we're gonna have a one-on-one pairing session. So what I usually like to do is I record my meetings as a link with the date on it, so that it becomes easy for me to kind of have a series. So what I've created was a meeting snippet template, where when I create it, you can see that it's already created the link for me, the double brackets, and then it has the on today's date basically. And so I can be pairing session with, Vibing Cat. And so then what's nice about this is if I go ahead and open this on the side, I can be well, this is a meeting, and I have a generic meeting template. So I can say, okay, insert generic meeting. And then this is nice because I get some metadata regarding I've already typed it with this tag. Let's say I know that's going to be on Zoom, and then, here's the date that it was on. And then I can go ahead and just, fill out the agenda, the notes, the tasks. And so if reducing repetition is good for optimizing your workflow, then Obsidian Templater, which again is another community plugin, that is definitely the next place I would start to study. So I would say those are the two good next steps once you've had the basics of Obsidian under your belt. So hope that helps. If you have any other questions, keep the questions coming. I love it. All right. So we're talking about learning a new skill. Particularly, we're learning about Japanese. And so for me, I've started to track my... Actually, let me delete this file right now, because this is not a real thing. Not become a better programmer, become proficient in Japanese. So I'm starting to track the different resources I'm using, but more importantly, I'm trying to figure out how the heck do I make this... How do I make use of Obsidian to really start to like sort of have things grow over time. And so here now, let's see. So interesting that I have my resources like this. I really should link to Japanese, I realize. So if I link to that, this gives me from here to Japanese. Okay. So from Japanese here to my Japanese dictionary. Okay, here we go. So Japanese is here. So right, I created, so I did this thing where I was trying to do my own Japanese alphabet. So is that gonna open? Can I click shift open? There you go. Okay. So here we go. I'm starting to play around with, I started playing around with how I could track the letters that I'm learning along with the characters that I'm doing. And so I came across something that was kind of interesting that I never thought would become a problem, but it is. And I'll show you what in a second. But this has been kind of cool, right? Because what I've been able to do is start to group things according to headings. And like, for example, I realized there's this pattern here with how they do consonants in that, if you look a little bit, let me zoom in a little bit. You'll notice that the ha, ba, and pa of this all actually contain the symbol is almost identical. And this happens the same way all down through the columns, right? The ha, he, hu, he, and ho. And basically it's this little bit like these little signifiers, like the double, almost like apostrophe that makes it turn into like that B sound versus the circle that turns into the P sound. And the way I found that out was because I was like basically taking notes in Obsidian, and I was starting to group things and look for patterns. And then eventually I constructed this, which was pretty nice. And so I noticed it with like the K and the G and this kind of stuff. And so some of you may be thinking though, you're like, wait, Ben, why are you doing this? There are PDFs and resources galore when it comes to like the Japanese alphabet, especially things like languages. These have been documented for ages. Why are you doing this here? And one of the key concepts that I've been trying to really ingrain in myself is really that Obsidian is about my own personal search engine. And that if I simply just call it drop a PDF in here, it certainly is available for reference if I want to look at it. But there is something to be said about typing it in myself to codify that information, to get that, call it a bit more muscle memory. More importantly, actually, that because Japanese is a phonetic language, then I also would get a little bit of an opportunity to get an experience of how basically working with the Japanese keyboard would work. If I'm typing, in this case, the hiragana, then great, then I can get that experience as well. And so also by slowly adding the letters that I'm learning, because I'm using various resources here. So you'll see that actually, this is not even accurate, it's Duolingo Japanese. Here, when I look at sort of what I'm doing with Japanese, let me see, this is a become proficient in Japanese. You'll see that I'm using various apps, and so the apps are indicated by the plus signs. And so through these apps, I have started to slowly gain certain vocabulary and things. And so each time I've done that, what I've done is I've come into either my alphabet or I have my Japanese dictionary. And so I kind of like actually naming it this, like my Japanese dictionary and like my Japanese alphabet, because my goal here is not to provide some all like encyclopedic knowledge where it's like referencing every single thing that could exist, but especially I think for earlier development of skills, you want to reference things that like this. Again, this is a personalized search engine, so why not show the things that I've personally learned so far and have some way of tracking that? And I think this is kind of like, as a result, it's kind of nice because then I can go, oh, right, I learned how to say night. I learned, yasai is vegetable, osake is alcohol, and that kind of stuff. And so one of the things here you'll notice here is the table format within the Japanese dictionary. And so this is very cool, right? This is a plugin called Advanced Tables, which is one of the most popular ones because, let's face it, when you're typing a table in Markdown, it is really annoying to have to be like, let's see, my name, and then it's already formatting for me. So let me disable it real quick. Advanced Tables, disable. So normally to write a Markdown table, you have to be like name, age, and then you'd have to be like, okay, then here are my dashes. And then like this looks pretty good so far. And then you're like, okay, my name is going to be, let's do Benjamin. And my age here, I'm gonna write 33. And then you'd be like, oh no, I gotta format this. Now I have to go back. You gotta count the characters. You gotta expand it. And now you probably have to put a couple of spaces. Like formatting is a pain, to say the least. But with something like advanced tables, on the other hand, so I'm gonna turn this back on. It makes things really, really easy. So one, I can go name, age, and then when I hit enter, you'll notice it automatically starts to calculate the width and space. So if I go Benjamin, and if my age is 300, you'll see that everything's automatically formatting, and it's really pretty. And this is super nice. There's a problem though. In that, funny enough, by choosing to learn Japanese and trying to make everything work, I came across a bug which is kind of interesting, which is one, when you're inside the table, every time you hit enter, right, it automatically creates a new row. So in this particular case, if I say Cassidy and then she's 200, then boom, like that's nice. But what happens now when I want to add other characters? And this is what I think I learned a little bit about fonts and that kind of stuff. So one of the things in a perfect world for me was with this nouns column, for example, was that I wanted to be able to not only write the romaji, which is basically like the Western phonetic spelling of how you would pronounce the word. I also wanted to practice writing the actual hiragana with basically like the katakana lettering with it so I could pair it together. But something weird kind of happened. So let's just show you how this would work, right? So I'm going to go ahead and let's just create a new table so I don't botch the original one. So I have the romaji, and then I'm going to write the hiragana, and then I'm going to write translation like this. Okay. So what's interesting is that, so romaji for, let's just do the alcohol, right? So, I'll do one that I actually learned recently that's not even on this list. It's sushi, right? So sushi actually, funny enough, is literally basically written exactly as you would expect, right? Sushi. And then the hiragana here, what I would do is I would go ahead and switch over to my hiragana keyboard, and I go su. And then here you'll notice that one, I now actually have the correct hiragana for su, which is this symbol right here. And then I can type shi. But then, already it's starting to change. That's not what I wanted at all. So I'm going to try to undo this. So I just want su, right? And so when you're working with other languages, particularly in this character, you have to press enter to select it. But watch what happens. When I hit enter, it draws me all the way back down because, understandably so, the plugin has taken over. So one, not ideally great, or not an ideal experience in that regard. But the other thing too is that you'll notice now that I've added sushi as the hiragana, the formatting is slightly off, like just enough where the fact that we have monospace characters and we want like the perfectly lined up table and that kind of stuff. This for me is like basically a bit of a deal breaker in this regard, because now it's weird because if I want to do like osake, right, now I have to go like and then I have to, and I can disable the enter. So I tried that before. So I went to advanced tables. I remove this because it does say that like avoid conflicts, but now it's like, okay, so osake, and then here we go, and then now I can say, okay, let me go back to English for a bit. So this is alcohol and this is osake, and then this isn't the worst, but I would say from like a Markdown formatting, it's kind of sad that this, I say sad, but it's understandable because when you're looking at monospace fonts, they're assuming you're using letters, which again, like have fixed widths. When we're talking about now kanji and this kind of stuff, this stuff can only be taken into account via, I think it's size. And as you can see, like if I zoom in a bit, you'll see that the characters actually take more like 1.5 character spaces. And so for that reason alone, I think technically this counts as 2 characters, even though the space of it is basically roughly 3. So a little bit of a bug, and it's not the worst in the end, but it's a bit sad because you can't line it up. You see here that like when I'm hitting the space bar, it's still slightly out. So it's probably one of those things where I'm probably going to end up just accepting it in the table, because at the bare minimum, when it's rendering out, on this side, you see the hiragana, you see the romaji, the translation. This ends up spitting out fine. It's a little sad because I wanted the Markdown to look the same. So learning this then does means that like you start getting this, I don't know, kind of fun effect of like hard, like, how do I explain this? You're encoding your knowledge in a way that really allows you to start looking things up in the future, so that when I'm at my next tutoring lesson, I can look up the dictionary that I've learned so far. And again, I'm starting to wonder, like, to be honest, whether I start breaking this out more as far as like breaking out nouns into food categories, and how rich of a graph I think would be useful in learning something like a language. Because obviously, like, eventually this thing is going to grow to be gigantic, right? Like, look, even within all of this, this is already pretty darn long. So I'm trying to see. You know what so yeah, anyways. So because of that, then it's like, okay, how do we link things together in a way that allows you to see relationships over time and like start to see exceptions? And that's what I've been playing with. So if any of you are learning new languages and want to basically try, make like taking your notes and as you're learning skills, how to make those things connect over time, I would certainly love to see what everyone else is doing. Because, so for example, the other thing that I'm doing recently is like, you saw that I had like, trying to like do more sort of programming drills and that kind of thing to get better at that skill over time. And so one of the things I've been doing is, let's see, I had, it was like, let's do the regex execute program, for example. So this was a course. Let me just kill everything else. So I've gone through and like went through this program and then went through and just started like practicing the various things and taking notes. And so what's kind of neat though is that over time, let's see, it needs to so here, regex course is connected to regex. So if I increase the depth on this, we'll see that here on the regex chain, we have different resources that I'm working with, but then we also have, different things that I'm learning and that kind of stuff, along with like, for example, oh, here you go. Like this was a really great talk by Leah Varro here, where let's see, what did I take notes on for this particular one? Whoa, that one is really big. That one's connected. So look at that flower. So yeah, so, funny notes regarding like things like I could match emojis, which is really cool. And then that, more importantly, I didn't know that emojis are a combination of emojis. And, I think a lot of Obsidian really at the end of the day is that practice of forming those relations. Like basically, if you could have a scan of your brain to show the neurons connecting the different concepts to what, Obsidian is your way of having that become something that manifests in, call it like the physical world, that other people can actually see, rather than something that is kind of arbitrary inside of your brain. And so, for example, if you're wondering why like Sarah popped up on my list, it's because she's the one that actually recommended this talk to me. And so that's what it was. And then, event. I use the ta-da emoji. I've decided for events. So yeah. Cool. Let's see. So we talked about sort of what I'm currently doing with the Japanese, and it's been actually really great to have that practice of taking those notes and developing my own dictionary. Yeah, I gotta say, it's done a lot for me in terms of solidifying those concepts and memorizing those things and starting to make it feel a bit more second nature, so that when I'm going through drills, it's honestly become actually a lot of fun. So I'm excited to continue that Japanese journey. If anyone else is learning or wants to practice, don't hesitate to let me know. All right. So in terms of topics for today, let's see. So here we've talked about the Freewrite Traveler workflow, the notes on this actually. So inability to define specific folders in Dropbox proved to be a hindrance, and even Zapier was limited its ability to help. And then here within the Japanese, we sort of talked about that. And it looks like this Zapier is actually going to be not very useful. So we're not even going to bother sharing that in the show notes later on, once I have that up. And so, yeah, let's see. Actually, you know what? I'm going to try to do better as well. Vibing Cat, you had that great question regarding next steps. Next steps after basics of Obsidian. So, maybe I'll do it like this going forward. Yeah, that's good. Okay. And actually, you know what? I'm going to give credit to Vibing Cat for that. That's great. Yeah. Okay. So we have some time left in the day. I'm going to probably, this stream session will be a little bit shorter since we start a little bit later today and have a couple of other things to take care of. But one of the things I thought we would take a look at actually within the Obsidian Office Hours series here is, which one would I want to look at? You know what though? I think it makes sense to probably save this for another day where we can do a little bit more of a deep dive. So, all right. I think for today, what we're going to do is we're going to wrap it up here. And so let me go over to intermission. Yeah. So again, sorry for starting late today. And I'm a little sad we couldn't get the Traveler workflow working. But again, it's all about understanding, like, as you're taking your notes and you're developing your productivity system, be careful that you don't try to optimize past the point of like useful return on investment of time. Because, for example, we could have probably spent the whole session trying to get the perfect sync set up so that every time I updated my Freewrite Traveler, it was going straight to Obsidian. I think the only time that's really worth it, though, is if really the Freewrite Traveler becomes your primary writing device and you really kind of want a way to like really have that talk to each other. I would say for me, because Freewrite Traveler is more about long form writing in like a concise way. Like, honestly, I have a quick capture folder for the Freewrite Traveler, but that's only if I'm like in the middle of writing something and I really need to capture it. But otherwise, to me, your phone is a better like vehicle for that kind of idea generation, because that's usually when you're like on the go and you want to do something, you want to just quickly grab your phone and just go like, oh, I just want to quickly throw something in. And speaking of quick capture, actually, a fun little thing right here. So this was actually introduced to me by Andrew. And so Andrew taught me that, particularly on iPhone, there's an accessibility feature where you can customize the back of your phone to receive a double tap, and it will actually trigger a specific action, particularly a shortcut. And so you see that when I double tap on my phone, you'll see that it actually opens Obsidian basically without me doing anything else. So it means I don't need to go to home. I don't need to switch context. Just by double tapping my phone, I'm able to switch over. And this, I need to customize it a little bit more so that it can go straight to like, call it like a quick capture note. But this has been a super awesome hack for, honestly, I mean, I'm using it for quick capture, but if you have another reason why you might want to customize like a double tap on your phone to open a specific thing or do a specific thing, you can make that happen. And maybe I need to just write a blog post on that so y'all can do that, but it is very cool. Let's see. Oh, great. I have a question here from Dragon Dust. Do I have a naming logic with my notes? Format, for example, a blog post about Obsidian versus the normal Obsidian note. Yes, this is a great question. So one, let me do, let's see, Office Hours 11. So let me add that. This is a great question here regarding naming logic of notes via Dragon Dust. Okay, excellent. Okay. So one of the most challenging things about Obsidian, I think, is the fact that you're basically always having to refer to a file name of a specific note, more or less. And this can be particularly challenging because if you subscribe to sort of more of the flat architecture that I propose with like keeping all my notes in one folder rather than trying to constantly organize it, because again, I think the correct place for a note to live depends on the context in which you're searching for the note. And I think oftentimes notes exist in multiple places. or basically they're supposed to coexist in multiple places at once. Call it like the multiverse, right? There's variants in which it's supposed to, and context is supposed to exist. But folders always try to force it into one context, and that's what that's why I think the flat structure works better for most people in the long run over like fixed folders. As a result, this does mean you got to get a little bit more clever about how you name things. So to Dragon Dust's point, if we're talking about Obsidian here, typically if you link to Obsidian, the nice thing about this is that you probably are thinking you're probably prime via this Twitch, is that we're talking about the Markdown editor. But at the same time, if you're, call it a geologist, or you really enjoy talking about rocks, well, guess what? Obsidian is also the name of an actual rock. And so then at what point are you talking about Obsidian the app, or are you talking about Obsidian the rock? And so one of the ways that I think, so right now, so you notice, okay, look, so I currently don't have an actual flat Obsidian note because I already knew this was going to be a problem. One of the ways you can deal with this is to have just an alias. So call it like Obsidian app, for example. I was doing this for a little bit. And so what this does is that, let's call it, we have an Obsidian app, and then so here, you notice that Obsidian now has a reference for Obsidian app here, and this will automatically map it accordingly correctly to the right Obsidian note. But the problem I found with this, though, is that putting a bunch of suffixes with app on everything is rather tricky and doesn't always make the most sense and not very clean. Oh my gosh, Jacob, you're totally right. Thank you so much. Ha! Whoops. Okay. Let's back it up a little bit. Okay. Oh man, this is the tricky thing about this stuff. Thank you for reminding me to switch scenes. Thanks, Plan. I know. I got to get better at this. Okay, that's totally fine. So just I guess start over with the explanation a little bit to pair it with the video. So basically, your question regarding Obsidian, we have Obsidian here, which could mean the rock or the app. And one of the ways I deal with this is to use an alias. So I'll go like, I mean Obsidian, I'll use Obsidian here. And then in here, I'll go, okay, this is the rock Obsidian. So then what I might have then is Obsidian, the app, right? And so the way you get around this then is that both of these can have the alias of Obsidian right here. So the app Obsidian versus the rock Obsidian. And so this means that now inside of my notes, whenever I want to talk about something like I just acquired 10 pieces of Obsidian, I can now be much more specific. You'll see that even though both of them are saying Obsidian in my autocomplete, it tells me which file it's actually referring to. So in this case, I'm referring to the rock. And because of this alias syntax right here with the single pipe operator, when this is rendered to the page, you'll see that it just says, I just acquired 10 pieces of Obsidian, and it will know to point to the rock page rather than the app page. Now, that said, I decided that apps are so common. They're a bit like, as far as I'm concerned, like software is so common in how I reference things that they kind of deserve their own prefix, because otherwise what I end up with is a lot of software that ends up taking over normal words, which means it'll automatically get picked up by like backlinking and that kind of stuff, because it's trying to be clever, understandably so that, if I import a paper on Obsidian, it'll just try to like make all these relationships that don't exist, because I am talking about the app specifically. And so this is where I personally have started this new I've started following, I haven't started this trend, where similar to how I do for the people here, you'll notice I here with Dragon Dust and Vibing Cat prefix with the @ symbol, I am prefixing my apps with the plus symbol, and kind of software in general. Because I found that software, they do try to be really clever with like doing either really short names or doing things that are like simple. Remote.com is like a site, right? But like, I don't want remote being referred to in every single conversation I have about remote work and that kind of stuff. So that's the kind of thing where I would prefix it with a plus, because it's like a tech software thing. And that's basically a trend I'm doing to resolve that at this point. And so that's kind of the naming logic for the notes. Otherwise, to be honest though, I try to treat my note titles like as if they were API endpoints. So meaning that they try to be as unique as humanly possible. So this is why, for example, I don't just write like, so Obsidian Office Hours, I will write the session that it's on, or if I'm doing a meeting, I will put the date that it's on. So that way it's not like Twitch stream July. It's like Twitch stream on July 13th. And then that way you end up having like a very consistent series of file names that are that's super nice. And so I found that to be quite useful for me personally. So yeah. And if you approach it like that, again, also it helps with just querying things as well, just in the future. Because when I'm looking up a meeting note, so let's say, the last time I talked with Cassidy, right? So I would say sync with Cassidy, and you can see that I have all these different dates here. And this is quite useful because odds are you're looking for something recent, and then you probably know vaguely what day it is. And so that way I don't have to just be like sync with Cassidy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so, which is probably a little bit less useful. And so I find that the date is a great way of tagging specific events. So yeah, hope that was helpful. But all right, cool. All right, now time to switch back. I will get better at this scene changing thing. I'm in the midst of rewiring some of the stuff on my desk, and my Stream Deck is currently offline. So that's something I'll need to get up and running. But thanks everyone for joining and hanging out today. Again, if you ever have any questions about Obsidian as you're going through your process, don't hesitate to DM on Twitter and reach out. And so we'll kind of go from there. And then I'll start querying up sort of more plugins for us to kind of take a look into and explore and just sort of nerd out. So I will talk to y'all later. Thanks, everyone.